Like to call to order the Utility Special District Board of Directors meeting, Wednesday, February 19, 2020, 5:34 p.m. Madam Roll Call.
Chairperson Kashamba Miller Anderson.
Present.
Chair Pro Tem Julia Botel.
Here.
Board Member Trodrick McCoy. Board Member Shirley Lanier. Board Member Douglas Lawson.
Here.
Ex officio member Mayor Ronnie Felder. City Manager Jonathan Evans.
Present.
Interim Director of Utilities Deirdre Jacobs.
Here.
District Clerk Claudine Anthony is present. District Attorney Don Nguyen.
Here.
District Finance Director Randy Sherman. You may proceed.
We'll have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilman Lawson.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any additions, deletions, or substitutions?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, disclosures by the Board of Directors.
No, Madam Chair.
We have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Board Member Lawson.
Yes.
Pro Tem Botel.
Yes.
Chair Miller Anderson.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Comments from the public on consent agenda. All matters listed under this item are considered to be routine and action will be taken by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. We don't have any consent agenda items, so we'll go down to our awards and presentations. I'm sorry, we have a motion to accept the agenda? Did
So
I already
moved.
do- I said that already. Okay. All I gotta do is just find the agenda and I'll be okay, right? No, I just need to read, that's all. Awards and presentations. Public hearings? None?
None, Madam Chair.
All right, regular agenda item. End of regular agenda item. Comments from the public will come to after we finish the discussion and deliberation. Item number 1.
Update on proposed new water treatment plant.
All right, Mr. Evans, Ms. Jacobs.
Madam Chair and members of the board, the city staff has been working diligently with our consultant, Mr. Nigel Grace from Brown and Caldwell, to bring to fruition some of the important elements as it relates to moving forward with a new water treatment plant. This has been a priority of this board since you've been seated, and staff has been working diligently to bring decision points to you so we can move forward in an aggressive fashion. We know that the existing treatment process that we currently utilize is an archaic system, and we're moving forward as quickly as possible to bring a superior product here to our community. Ms. Jacobs and her team have put together a PowerPoint presentation that will encapsulate where we are today, but also where we hope to move, and certainly then hit on some of the items that the board has authorized to continue to keep our existing plant up and operational. So without further ado, Assistant City Manager and Interim Director of the Utility District, Ms. Deirdre Jacobs.
All right.
Good evening, Madam
evening.
Chair, Dr. Botel, Mr. Lawson, and Mr. Evans. For the record, my name is Deirdre Jacobs, and I'm the Assistant City Manager here with the City of Riviera Beach. This evening, we really didn't have any agenda items in particular, so we wanted to use this as an opportunity to just surprise you on where we are with the development of our proposed new water treatment facility. And Mr. Nigel Great has been working hand in hand with us as a consultant from Brown and Caldwell to assist, and a presentation has been prepared for you to view and be able to understand where we are at this particular point in time.
Okay.
So Nigel, if you would come up to the podium. As he begins his presentation, we wanted to simply make you aware, when I say me, I mean the utility district staff, that over the last several months, we've been working diligently to put projects into place, and some of the major accomplishments have been, we were just awarded a grant of a little under $2 million from the Department of Economic Opportunity to replace some of our aerial crossings as well. We've done some buried infrastructure improvements There have been a couple of design build teams that have been in place to help with our water treatment plan improvements. We've been working with the Department of Health so that we can minimize and get rid of the series of issues that have come up against us with regards to the consent order. There's been some rehabilitation to the lime softening units, and we've done a wealth of infrastructure improvements underground. Also, we have some of our staff here from the utility special district. In the event, I know Mrs. Miller Anderson had concerns with some of our lift stations. So in the event you want to be brought up to speed on where we are with those, Mr. Joe Jackson is here. Also, Mr. Brown is here, and Mr. Danford is here if you have specific questions about the collection systems or the water treatment plan in particular.
Okay, let the record reflect Mr. McCoy is present. All right. Are we going to do a presentation?
Yes, at this time, Mr. Grace is going to lead us through the presentation.
Certainly, thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and council members. Certainly, I appreciate this opportunity to work alongside utilities district staff to further the interest in improving the overall quality of the water program within the city. The manager gave, a synopsis overview of the objectives of this program. I'm going to spend the next few minutes just kind of recapping, what the vision is for this overall program and some of the accomplishments that's been achieved to date. Significant progress has been made with the existing drinking water system, as Ms. Jacobs recently enumerated, in furthering the interests of this new technology-centered treatment facility. A number of important improvements and progress has been made with the procurement of the site and some preliminary investigations. But just to step back and take a macro look at where things are headed. As part of this program, virtually all elements of your drinking water system will be impacted. Your assets can be categorized as distributed assets. Those are everything outside of the fence line, as well as the centralized assets. The types of distributed assets that will be impacted are your existing wells. You're going to need additional wells. Some wells may need to be rehabilitated. Some wells may need to be replaced altogether. We're going to be tapping new water supplies in an aquifer, brackish water aquifer that historically has not been utilized by the system. Your raw water transmission infrastructure, as well as your finished water transmission infrastructure, are going to be impacted. The centralized, when we think of the utility district water system restructuring, we really think first and foremost about the centralized assets. That is the water treatment plant and the supporting facilities around that. But together with the distributed assets, that really represents the collective whole of the improvements that will be made to the system. Pivoting a little bit to the water treatment assets, as you're aware, we're looking at locating the facility at the site located just cat-a-corner across the railroad tracks at Avenue L and Blue Heron. That facility is going to locate more than just a water treatment plant, which is defined in this area, but we're looking at an additional utility administration building that will not only house utility staff, but will bring together a number of other departments within the city to place them under one roof. These are departments that could include procurement, finance, any department that the city needs located in a centralized facility. This campus will also house your public works facilities, and there are a collection of structures ranging from maintenance structures to a public works administration center and offices that will also be located on the site. One of the initial things that needs to be done prior to moving full steam ahead with implementing some of these improvements is to determine what this site is going to actually look like. For each of these buildings, who's going to reside within each? What department functions need to be housed? What resources need to be provided around each of these to be able to accommodate. In essence, planning needs to be done to determine what the collective needs of the various stakeholders of this facility needs to be. And once that is in place, site planning needs to be established to determine, the concurrency requirements for this site, traffic, parking, etc., as well as the aesthetics of this site. What's this going to look like? This development is essentially going to become an important anchor for this particular corridor. So a number of planning efforts have to be done to determine kind of the theme of what this is going to look like. And the central core, which relates to the treatment facility, and unlike the existing treatment plant, the overwhelming majority of the treatment facility will be housed in one building. It's a very compact process that will host, the treatment process, the laboratory control center, etc. Those assets have to be, due to homeland security requirements, have to be within a protected, secure environment. So looking at kind of the flow and movement of staff across the site, as well as the public, there are going to be public access areas built into this. All this needs to be thought through in an integrated manner before going forward. The other thing to keep in mind as it relates to the treatment facility is that there's a number of permitting related things that have to be worked out, right? With the water management district to develop additional water supply allocation. Without a firm commitment to the supply that's going to feed this facility, then you can't really align the technology and design details. So those are some of the things we're going to be working on in the immediate term. The goal is to get to a defined site plan that can go through the city's site plan review process and be approved, to establish the programming of each of these buildings, the layouts, the floor plans, what functions need to be consolidated and where. And with that, then the city will be in a position to begin to put out delivery packages to start phase construction of this site. What we're looking at here is a conceptual rendering of what this site can look like, but as it goes through the facility planning process, things may move around to be able to meet all the respective requirements. So one of the key elements of the treatment facility relates to capacity. What does the capacity of this plant need to look like? Not just to meet the current needs, but also future needs. And what we have here is a graph that in gray, this box essentially represents your current water supply allocation from the superficial aquifer. This is the water that the lime softening process is able to treat and deliver. This line represents your forecasted growth over the next 20 years. This dashed line here shows basically an attenuated growth trajectory that assumes over time the city will become more efficient in its use of water supply. So once it transitions from lime softening to nanofiltration, as we know, this nanofiltration process produces a significant waste stream called a concentrate. That concentrate is not available for consumption. So essentially you have a reduction in the available finished water based on your current supply. So that reduction is going to have to be made up by some alternative supply. And that's where we've talked about the Florida aquifer. That's a deeper aquifer. We're looking at wells that are essentially 10 times the depth of the existing wells, and that's a brackish water supply. So your future facility is going to rely on a reduced amount of existing superficial supply, and it's going to be augmented with this Florida supply. The permitting process will determine where this break line is, right? We're going to have to get with the South Florida Water Management District, work with them, do some technical analysis to demonstrate and justify the forecasted growth. We're going to have to demonstrate that the pumpage that we're going to do here won't have any adverse impacts, whether it be to the landfill out to the west or the Solitron site or regional canal network. There's an analysis that needs to go through, and that's going to set this bar here. We're projecting that that bar is going to be set here, but it could move up or down. Once we establish this bar, then that same permitting process is going to allocate additional supply from the Florida aquifer to meet the city's 20-year forecasted growth demand. So that's kind of the next big step that's right before us to embark upon this permitting process to nail down the supplies. Once you have the supplies in place, once you have an approved site plan for the overall site where we understand what's going where and how much space is needed, then with those respective buckets of information, then you'll be equipped to go out on the street and begin the process. So how is all this going to come together? Some of the initial planning effort that's required to move things forward are well underway. We have a good feel for the water supply need in terms of a capacity standpoint. We've done some preliminary site investigations. In fact, we just completed a phase 1 assessment of the site. As you know, the city has already procured an adjacent site. So there are a number of things that we've done to preliminarily establish that. The next wave of activities is permitting, the water use permitting that I just described, as well as the facility planning. In parallel with that, the city has had a number of ongoing engagement with the DEP through the state revolving funding program, as well as the state appropriations opportunities to begin to understand what the funding landscape is going to look like. And I think the city is working on a parallel track to develop a cohesive plan for funding all of these improvements. So that's going to be an ongoing effort that ultimately will have to sync up with the infrastructure improvements before major capital investments can be made. The other component that we've recently looked at, and we held a workshop together with the city's leadership team that was pretty cutting across multiple departments with the city, where we took a look at the various delivery models for implementing the overall program. And we went through an exercise to begin the process of aligning each component of a capital program with different delivery mechanisms, with the objective of identifying how to kind of expedite the overall delivery process. So these are the front-end planning efforts that need to occur to set the stage for any delivery that's going to occur. In parallel, we believe that the city is probably close to being able to put together a solicitation to go out and begin to bring on board design delivery teams or design build contractor teams that will ultimately carry the program forward. So that's a step that's down the line, but probably will be initiated sometime this year. So moving beyond the initial planning, everything we're looking at here represents the delivery of various elements of a capital program. And as I mentioned earlier, your overall capital program includes water supply improvements. That's basically a well field and associated infrastructure. You have the treatment plant, and I bundle it together with the public works facility, although that really deserves its own path, but it's bundled here. And then we have the transmission system. So collectively, this represents the primary infrastructure we're talking about. But we recognize, staff development is also important. The city is migrating to an entirely different process. Different skill sets will be required to do this. So, we think the city, and we advise the city to be very intentional about developing a cohesive developmental program for bringing staff along and getting them involved so that the transition from lime softening to this new technology will be relatively seamless. And we believe the time to start is sooner rather than later. So we indicate kind of that staff development program here. Systems represents all of the basic enabling systems to facilitate effective management of the overall program. Again, it's the kind of the hidden things that kind of make everything work together. So that needs to be given some thought. There's a pretty long runway to kind of think through some of those things, but we can't lose sight of that fact. And finally, the final element we have here relates to the decommissioning of the existing water treatment plant. So collectively, this represents the overall program. Nominally, we're saying that, the longest delivery pathway is you're probably looking at a 5-year horizon to get through all of this.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So that 5 years does that 5 years incorporate the 1.5 years from the previous slide?
It it partially does, right? And going back to the previous slide, we believe that the city will be able to initiate the procurement process. If you notice, the purpose starts here, right? For certain elements of the program, maybe putting out the administration building, for turnkey delivery. We're going to be at a point where we can initiate that sooner. The permitting, on the other hand, may take a year to get through the permitting on the worst case. So that pushes the ability to do anything a little further out. So collectively, I've typically said, 1 to 6.5 years all in, right? There are opportunities to compress that, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Again, this 1 to 6, 7 years is based on more of a conventional delivery approach. When you look at, and by conventional delivery, we're looking at the far left of this graphic here. And what this represents is the more traditional, you design it, then you permit it, you bid it, you bring on board a contractor who builds it, right? Everything occurs sequentially. This takes the longest time, right? The city will be under contract with a designer, you'll be under contract with a contractor, and you basically oversee the contractor's work to ensure that they delivered on what they expected. The next step along the progression, which compresses things a little bit, is referred to as construction management at risk. It's very similar to the traditional approach, except that you hire the contractor pretty much at the same time you hire the engineer, right? So the contractor is able to work collaboratively through an informal collaborative relationship with the engineer, and at some point before the design is complete, the contractor is then able to put together what they call a guaranteed maximum price, right? That's a negotiated price, kind of an open book principles, right? They have to get multiple bids and so on and so forth. And with that guaranteed price, you're able to essentially, once you agree to it, launch into construction, right? So it's very similar to this, except that the construction can actually get going in somewhat of an overlap fashion with design. It's not all sequential. And you have the benefit of the contractor's input during the design stage, whereas in this model, they occur in different time domains, right? Now, once you move beyond this, you're going from kind of the more traditional collaborative approach to the design-build model, right? And in the design-build model, the city is entering into one contract with that design-build entity. That design-build entity is typically led by a contractor with an engineer partnered with them. And once you bring them on board, you have two basic approaches for doing that. You have the progressive design-build model, and you have the fixed-base model. They differ in a few important ways. In the progressive model, you bring on board the contractor, you work together with the contractor to define the project, you provide input into what the expectations are, and then the contractor prepares a guaranteed maximum price, right? That represents a point where beyond which you're locked in, right? Once you agree to the guaranteed maximum price, then it's in the contractor's hands to deliver the project, right? And you really don't need a lot of upfront work to be able to pursue this model, right? You're probably 6+ months from going out and hiring potentially a design-build contractor. Once you have your permits set and you know your water supply and you have your facility plan done, right? You can actually put out a solicitation and hire someone potentially to do this, right? So you have one contracting mechanism in place and that handles everything. In this model, you may have an advisor there that kind of is a little bit of a go-between and to advise on technical matters, but pretty much you're working with a contractor. With a fixed price model, it's similar, except that you, the city, and your advisor do more front-end work to work through the design details to a higher degree, right? And so the proposal you get from the contractor is a fixed price proposal. So the contractor doesn't try to innovate or do anything different. The contractor looks at your requirements and they develop a fixed price proposal, and once it's awarded, they're off to delivering the project, right? So they're very similar with the exception that the fixed price approach requires more front-end work on the part of the city and its advisor to develop the design requirements than the progressive model.
Let the record reflect, Councilwoman Lanier's on the dais.
Much of the opportunities that we're looking at to expedite the overall delivery of a program fall within this spectrum here, right? From the construction management at risk, called CMAR, to some variant of the design build process. And with the design build process, it's easy to make performance expectations of the contractor. You know, we need a supply that is this efficient and costs this much and so forth. Go figure it out, right? Whereas the other earlier models are more prescriptive, right? So this is where we're looking to gain a lot of time and shrink potentially that delivery time. And this is what we work through with staff in pretty much almost a half-day workshop to kind of look at the nuances of each of these models and line them up to the capital program. Once you get beyond design build, that's where you're integrating an operating component in there, right? So this design build operate, the operate dimension, now once the contractor builds it, they may be, you know, have a commitment to run the facility for some period of time, could be months, could be years, to demonstrate the functionality, perhaps train staff, etc. Or, you know, the city could turnkey the overall operation. I know that's not the city's objective, and that's not a priority here, but this is what this model represents, right? Going a step further beyond that, essentially you have the P3 model where another entity, the project entity, would bring together the financing, the engineering, the construction, the operations under one tent. You'd enter into a long-term, typically a long-term arrangement that would minimally cover the duration of the financing, and they would deliver the project, they would run it, they would maintain it, and in 20, 30 years, they'd basically turn the keys over to the city. So that's the far extreme of the project. So we've been looking really within this lens here for opportunities. And the front-end work that you have to do, the permitting, the facility, all of that is common to all of these options, right? You can't start building something unless you have a facility plan and you have a clear vision for what you're going to construct. So the initial work that we're, you know, getting set to embark upon now is really a necessary prerequisite, no matter the direction that you pursue. However, once everything is set and you're ready to start with construction, the design build models and the CMAR approach allows for schedule compression beyond what's otherwise achievable through the conventional approach. So that's that. So with that said, what are the immediate term next steps? The critical path elements involve the securing site plan approval, right? Again, that's addressing all the concurrency requirements and the programming needs for the various facilities, as well as securing. I think I made a little. I think I skipped to the very end. But the reality is that the next step involves securing the permit and securing the site plan approval. And with those in place, that will open the path for the city to aggressively move forward with delivery of some of these elements of the project. Let me see if there's okay. So the other element that I mentioned here is again, we had a lot of discussion about, you know, which components of the program would be suitable. Again, it's still an open question, but we've kind of narrowed it down. We know the treatment facility itself, because of the permitting that's required, would probably be the last thing out the gate. But you have elements of the public works facilities as well as the utility administration building that we think could be early out opportunities to get things going.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
do you see any roadblocks in terms of getting the water use permits? Are there any real obstacles to that, or is that something that's sort of rubber stamp sort of a thing?
It won't be rubber stamped, but there won't be any obstacles. The main potential obstacle would be if the city was to request additional allocation from the surficial aquifer. The current rules essentially have established a cap on how much you're allowed to be allocated from that aquifer. And you're not, under the current rules, allowed to withdraw more than the average usage between 2001 and 2006, right? So you're capped based on historic usage. If you want to exceed that cap, then it opens up extensive demonstration and modeling and calibrated groundwater models and things of that nature that would just simply take a lot of time and probably ultimately not produce a fruitful outcome. If you stay within your cap, right, then it's much more straightforward. And if your supplemental water supplies from the Floridan aquifer, right, again, that's available. There are not too many roadblocks to that, so that's probably the most expedited path. Staying within your cap and getting an additional allocation from the Floridan aquifer.
So when you say long-term water supply commitments, that's what you mean, the Florida aquifer?
Correct, correct. And one of the things you have to demonstrate to the satisfaction of the South Florida Water Management District is what your long-term forecasted needs are. They only permit based on the anticipated needs over a 20-year horizon. Right? So, and who knows what's going to happen in 30, 40 years. You design and you lay out the plan to provide some flexibility so you have somewhere to grow, 20, 30 years from now. But you're only going to get a permit for what you can demonstrate that you need within the next 20 years. So sometimes there's some back and forth. Like, for instance, if the district thinks that the city may not have adequate incentives to promote efficient water use, conservation programs, leak detection programs, things of that nature, they may want to permit a lower per capita demand or see a commitment, to implement programs that would ultimately bring your per capita demand down. And your per capita demand is hovering around 190 gallons per person per day. The district likes to see that much lower generally, right? And once you go to membranes, if you translate that to raw water per capita, you're going to be up over 200. They're not going to like that, right? They're going to want to see it under 200. So that's something we're going to have to work through. And they probably have permit stipulations that they put in place mandating certain actions, but it won't be a precondition to them giving you the allocation. They'll give you the allocation with strings attached.
So, may I? Mm-hmm. So, for example, any new construction in the city, the new condominiums or whatever that are going up on the island, we need to require them to have low flush toilets and some
Correct.
water-saving devices.
Exactly. And Brody can have toilet fixture retrofit programs in place. You can have, science fairs or festivals that you distribute information and best practices. There are any of a number of kind of goal-based conservation initiatives that have proven to be effective, right? Over time with sustained effort. The other component is water loss, right? Every time you have a canal crossing of a water main, just imagine if you're to develop a leak in that pipe, you really have no way of ever knowing that the leak exists, right? So when you look at the actual build consumption, and now the city with the benefit of new meters, you're going to get a more accurate read on what people are really consuming. You know what's leaving at the plant. You can look at the difference between the two and see, is that difference consistent with what you'd expect? To the extent that it's too large, then you know the water is going someplace that you're not accounting for, right? Whether that's authorized use that's not metered, right? Or unauthorized use or leakage, right? You want to go after leakage, right? As well as authorized uses that's not being accounted for two reasons. You don't want to have to build a brand new membrane plant and construct a number of $1 million wells to just have that water leak into the ground, right? To the extent that you can get a handle on leakage, right? It reduces the long-term capacity you're going to need. So that's an important thing that I think deserves some attention. The other component, if you have maybe grandfathered uses that are not metered, and that happens, it happens all the time, that's a potential revenue source that you want to be able to capture, right? So one of the things, these are the ancillary kind of spill-off initiatives that will emerge ultimately. You may be required, and I would say it's in the city's best interest to do it, whether it's required or not, to take an aggressive look at your water use balance and determine how that needs to inform the timing of when you provide capacity and expand. Any
Yes.
other questions?
Chair.
Go ahead.
I want to ask if there was some conversation or some at least variations of the P3 that's presented here. Like, say, for instance, the design, build, finance, maintain, but the city operates, or maybe some other financing and other efficiencies, quick project delivery.
Yeah, there's certainly, again, what I presented, they were kind of the main buckets, right? But there are a number of other variants and hybrids that could ultimately be considered depending on the specific needs of the city. From a financing standpoint, right, it's hard to conceive that a private entity can raise capital cheaper than the city, right? I mean, one conference call that we had with the DEP officials, they're offering SRF loans at essentially 0% interest with the potential for 10% loan forgiveness, right? And that's just to start. That's just one call, right? Private sector isn't going to be able to match that, right? No, they may provide the convenience of just going to one entity and they write one check and they do it all and you just agree to purchase water at a certain price, right? But ultimately, with all else being equal, that price it's difficult for that price to compete with your price, So the financing piece, it works in some cases, it makes sense, but that's part of what needs to be looked at as part of our comprehensive funding strategy, because it's not readily evident that unless the city has the inability to raise capital, but ultimately you're going to pay for their funding anyway, right? So the financing piece is one. The design, build, maintain. I was involved in one such project a number of years ago for Detroit. It was a large $200+ million facility. And, that was one of those fixed price design build projects, right? Where, the proposers had to produce almost completed documents and they agreed to a fixed price and that entity wants to ensure that, the contractors wouldn't take shortcuts that the city would then have to pay for through expanded maintenance and so forth. So they structured that as a design, build, maintain, where the contractor was required to maintain the facility for a 5-year period. If you go the CMAR or the progressive approach, it somewhat mutes the need, to consider that kind of approach, because inherently it's a collaborative process and you get much closer to getting what you want through those processes. But again, it's well worth looking into. There are many models. We've initiated the process with the city of looking at those models, and I think as we get closer to working with the city to procure those kinds of teams, that's when I think we'll bring a sharper focus on just what serves the city's best interests.
Yes, I like the idea of having an advisor or someone to help figure out which way or which hybrid that
Correct.
we would use. Yes. Thank you.
Do we have any public comment cards for this?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Any other questions from the board? Since you mentioned about the lift station, who would be speaking on that part?
Mr. Jackson is here.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your presentation. Just wanted to, we had a lot of complaints about the smell of, what lift station is that? What number is that? Right here by Wells?
Is that lift station 20?
20?
1A?
1A? So could you just kind of give us a little update publicly about that one?
Yes, my name is Joseph Jackson, Chief Water Sewer Maintenance Mechanic for the Utility District. Well, we had a couple issues, one being doors that we just got installed maybe a couple months ago, that cut down the smell, and also it was a odor control unit that was leaking around some of the fittings that we had to tighten up. So it smells a lot better over there now, And also, we do have, I think I have a couple requisitions in for odor control that we have to other odor control. Some that like absorb H2S gases and kind of hold smells and odors down. We have that in the procurement process right now. One other thing I did was I was able to kind of set the pumps where they don't pump down as much, because with the well emptying too low, it creates gases when the water goes in there and it stirs up all the time. So I had the well kind of maintain at a level instead of emptying and filling, so it'll kind of cut down H2S gas that's being created.
Okay, well, it definitely improved, so whatever we're doing now is definitely working, so I appreciate you all looking into that.
Don't go away. May I?
Go ahead.
How about Lift Station 10? Are we doing okay over there now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good.
We're doing great with it. Actually, I'm doing a try and buy. I'm looking to upsize the pumps, because we got a lot of stuff coming over there, and I noticed that some of the pumps are running a little bit longer than usual, and a lot because people are opening up. Man, when it rains, flows pick up drastically. So somebody's opening up manholes to clear parking lot to do whatever they're doing. So to kind of combat that until we find out where it's coming from, have to upgrade the pump so we can keep up with whatever comes. But there's no problems right now.
Good, thank you.
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, that ends item number 1. Thank you all so much again. Do we have any public comment cards in general?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Discussion by Executive Director of the Utilities Special District or the City Manager.
I don't have any additional comments other than, to thank the Utility Special District staff. They are really a unique group of people who work extra hard, and they work behind the scenes, and they really aren't noticed because they're not like the face of the city. They're not out in the open, but I've worked with them over the last few months, and they work really hard to do good work, especially considering, they're the ones that do what they're told to do. They were never the leaders, so considering that, I think they've done exemplary with regards to how they've managed to hold the Utility Special District together.
Thank you so much for that.
And Madam Chair, I also want to echo the same remarks from Ms. Jacobs. The staff has done some exceptional work to be able to bring some of the projects that have been neglected for a certain amount of time to fruition, so we can be able to correct it with the support of the board. So we've got an excellent group of folks over there that are committed to moving this district forward and excited about the future possibilities of what's ahead of us. Staff will continue to work through pinch points of this and really narrow down a timeline as to when we can see ourselves moving forward with going ahead and securing the appropriate funding to move forward with the ultimate design and construction of a new water treatment plant. 2 items that you will hear later on this evening that are applicable to our debt management and our investment policies will basically set the tone and provide us the policies necessary so we can go ahead and go out to market and to see what the bond markets will provide for us as it relates to this. So we are taking the steps to address this long-standing issue and bring the board some additional information as to how we move the needle. Obviously, we've been advocating for this project, the total overhaul of our utility district systems in Tallahassee and in Washington, and we will continue to do so. And as more information becomes available, certainly we will apprise the board of those things, because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation as our peer agency, the city of Fort Lauderdale, as they're trying to make some drastic steps to address some of the contamination issues that they had as it relates to wastewater getting into their potable water supply. So we're taking the steps because we don't want to be that case study that other agencies look at. We want to be the ones that are proactive in addressing some of the concerns and improving the quality of water. So once some of our clarifiers and some of our systems get online, you will be seeing an improvement of the water product we provide, but ultimately as we move forward to a new water treatment process.
All right, thank you. You wanted to respond to that?
No, just very briefly, tomorrow night at my town hall meeting, will this be the presentation? Great, thank you.
All right, statements by the district board, starting with Mr. Lawson.
No, Madam Chair.
All right, Ms. Lanier.
I appreciate the update today up in the Water Utility District. Especially Ms. Jacobs, you guys have done excellent work in keeping us informed about how this whole process is laying out. And I understand that it's in projects, it's in different chunks as we move forward, but I appreciate the fact that you guys are very thorough and very comprehensive with the information that you present to us. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. McCoy. Dr. Botel.
Likewise.
All right. And nothing from me other than thank you all. Concur with Ms. Lanier down there. With that being said, we stand adjourned.